Visit our sponsor, Powerful Products, at powerfulproducts.com right now. Click the link below. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is Monday, March 3rd, 2014, and breaking news. According to CNN, the mainstream bullshit propaganda network, Russia warns of military storm, what they are calling and insinuating to be a Russian-led invasion in Ukraine by 5 a.m. Tuesday local time, or face a military storm, according to Russia's Interfax news agency. Russia is warning Ukrainian forces to clear out. Of course, there's been a defection from the Navy over to pro-Russian forces. Russia's stock market has collapsed. The ruble has collapsed. They've been forced to raise interest rates. But what's important to note about this is, number one, what kind of move does the President of the United States have? If Vladimir Putin is playing chess and Obama is playing checkers, and Obama is clearly backed into a corner because he's really just a horrible president in terms of global and geopolitical relationships. How is this being interpreted by the mainstream media? How is this being pitched? And what happens next? Now, keep in mind, we were one of the first on the story, I would argue the first, detailing, really in grave detail, how this was going to be positioned by mainstream Western-influenced media and how this would be positioned here in the United States as a situation where the United States would have to pretend as if they were defending the sovereignty of Ukraine, when really the opposite has been the case. The opposite has been true. The West and the President of the United States in the New World Order paradigm and Western influence has been the preemptive actor in Ukraine to destabilize the country, which has only in reality prompted a response out of Russia. Now, the mainstream media, of course, is going to portray this as a Russian invasion, when it's actually the exact opposite. This is a U.S.-led invasion, coup, in Ukraine, which has only simply prompted retaliation by Vladimir Putin and by Russia. And notice, if we're surfing the internet here on CNN, the mainstream media propaganda network, you'll notice that it is entirely propagandized as a Russian-led attack, a Russian-led invasion. When again, I need to emphasize this once again, it is the exact opposite. Western influence, the West, the United States, the United Nations, the World Bank, which has all been interested in gearing up Ukraine into integration into the New World Order paradigm of limitless debt. Come into the United Nations, Ukraine. Let us saddle you with billions and billions of dollars of more debt. Let's help you and help propel the revolution, just like we did in Egypt with the revolution and re-revolution, just like they did with the forceful aggression in Libya and the outright murder of Muammar Gaddafi. And let's not forget the United States' influence in Syria and their utter and total and complete fabrication of weapons of war, chemical warfare, which had actually been perpetrated by the terrorists on the ground that had been armed and funded by the United States government themselves. Now, and of course the United States with this horrible, horrible track record, now intervening in Ukraine and prompting a retaliatory response from Vladimir Putin and Russia. Now, Obama is perceived incredibly weak by the rest of the world, by Russia especially. I would argue most nations around the world viewing the United States not necessarily militarily weak, because we do have quite a bit of might here in the States. We spend tons of money on defense and our military, but really geopolitically and politically weak. Again, Obama got completely owned after his red line comments in Syria and really did nothing that he said he was going to do. So the rest of the world is going to call Obama's bluff, and Vladimir Putin is clearly going to call the bluff of Obama. I really don't think Obama has a lot of options here outside of outlandish actions like staging another false flag attack or making it appear that Ukraine is being attacked by Russian forces is a reason to retaliate militarily. Obama really kind of playing off the grid right now, which I think is a part of the New World Order agenda, of course, to engage in war. This is all leading up. I believe we're already engaged in the big one, in the big global conflict, World War III, which we have been talking about in great detail for some time now. So pay careful and close attention to the propaganda, the titling report. Russia warns of military storm, how they're gearing this and propagandizing this as a Russian invasion when it's actually the exact opposite. And we've reported this on in detail with many critics tuning in to our content, by the way, saying we were dead wrong, only to find this being an absolute in huge crisis in Ukraine. Now, of course, we've talked about the geopolitical implications. We've talked about Russia and China's relationship, new world superpowers. We've talked about how this affects global currency, how this affects the energy markets. Keep in mind, Russia, a very large exporter of not just oil, but also natural gas running through Crimea, running through Ukraine. This, of course, has put temporary pressure on Russian stock markets and also their ruble, with their market crashing some 12.5% overnight, and forcing the Russian central bank to sell gold. Notice how central banks own gold, but for some reason it doesn't seem like the great majority of people do, to stabilize their currency. This is all pressure that Putin can push and place on the United States as a consequence to any sanctions, economic sanctions that the United States could think up. But of course, the U.S. in such an incredibly weak position, military force, although is certainly possible, doesn't seem likely, at least in the near term, without a false flag attack, without an engineered event, to promote and justify Obama's military action. And, keep in mind, Obama has literally been raped time and time again over his comments of, don't cross the red line, Syria and Bashar al-Assad, and his total weakness in that regard geopolitically. Keep in mind, it was Vladimir Putin here that actually brokered the deal with Bashar al-Assad in the first place and helped Obama really to save face after eating his own words on his red line comments. Again, the rest of the world does not respect Obama at all. China does not respect Obama or the United States. Russia, Putin here, does not respect the United States at all. And this is truly global superpowers inching their way closer towards war and political and currency domination over what has been enjoyed by the West for much of the last century. These are major implications and what I believe to be major events coming up next in the not too distant future. Russia and China, of course, in agreement over Ukraine, wielding and showing their power and showing and displaying to the world how weak the United States actually is. Russia and China largely in agreement over Ukraine. Hundreds of soldiers have surrounded military bases in Crimea, preventing Ukrainian soldiers from going in or out. You have images of the soldiers here, pro-Russian forces of Crimea. Also, of course, Russia's Black Sea Fleet, one of their largest bases and ports for the Navy based in Crimea. So not only do they have interests in natural gas and the export of this gas to Ukraine at steep discounts, by the way, which they'll now be revoking, but also its strategic importance in terms of its Navy and those geopolitical implications overseas. Markets tumbling as Ukraine tensions escalate. Again, I mentioned that the Russian stock market was down, the broad index down 12.5%. They had to sell gold reserves. They also had to raise interest rates to stem a decline of the ruble itself. So this is having grave consequences economically, not just in Russia, but also United States financial markets as well, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, last time I checked, down a 200 point decline. The Telegraph reports that NATO warns that Russia is risking Europe's peace and security. Article I encourage you to read. Also, the Financial Times. I thought that this was an interesting piece. Putin cooks up Obama's chicken moment in Ukraine. This was very much liberal, leftist hinged. I thought kind of in defense of Obama and kind of propagandized democratically, but still kind of gives you some good arguments on what Obama can do here, which the conclusion is, and the broad conclusion is really nothing. Again, short of staging some kind of September 11th style terrorist attack to put Obama in the position of having to defend United States interests militarily, outside of something as extreme such as that, another Gulf of Tonkin type engineered false flag moment, Obama really has nothing here. I mean, this image, this cartoon, has a lot of truth in it, showing the strength and the power of Russia and Vladimir Putin geopolitically and now economically as they weather their temporary storm and fall in the ruble, but embolden their relationship with global superpowers like China, like India, and also their allies, Iran, which are clear enemies of the Obama administration and the West. Another article here, inside Obama's plans to squeeze Russia. Again, Obama has really no moves here, in my opinion. If Vladimir Putin is playing chess, then Obama is playing checkers and really looks like a friggin' idiot and is not a political figure to be respected. Really is a child in the eyes of many of these political leaders, such as Vladimir Putin and leaders of China, etc. Russia's Medvedev predicts a new revolution in Ukraine and new bloodshed. A re-revolution, again, a byproduct of the revolution and coup led and orchestrated and manufactured by the United States and Kiev in the first place. The same thing happened in Egypt. The same thing happened in Syria. The same thing happens around the world, happened with the Arab Spring protests. All of this engineered by the West. This is a weapon of war, a weaponization of these areas of the world, clearly propelled and perpetrated by the United States. But this is extremely serious, folks, because Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said on Sunday that Ukraine's leaders had seized power illegally and predicted their rule would end with a new revolution and more blood, more bloodshed. Yahoo News reports that Russian troops flood into Crimea as markets plunge. Also, there was an excellent article here from Zero Hedge, Russian fleet giving Ukrainian Crimea forces an ultimatum to surrender or face, quote, storm. Ukraine's defense minister quoted. Again, CNN and the mainstream corporatist, leftist, mainstream bullshit CNN-led media are going to portray this as a Russian invasion, when again, this is simply a Russian response to a U.S.-led, propelled, engineered blood revolt and coup in Ukraine in the first place. But to give you an idea of just how serious this is as the ticking clock counts down, and Elizabeth Palmer tweets that the 4 o'clock time frame has been occupied and they're waiting for signs of military force. Interpreter notes that Ukraine's first president, Leonid Kravchuk, who served between 1991 and 1994, wrote in the Russian publication snob.ru today that the crisis could spark World War III. This is a direct quote. "I call on the Russian authorities to stop. Between our peoples should not be war. Does Russia not understand that this is the beginning of World War III?" he warned. Of course, AMTV and alternative media television has been way ahead of this curve. We have reported the truth consistently on a consistent basis, way ahead of the pack. Please continue to share our content, share this video, and tune in for updates as this really reaches a boiling point and a crisis point, which I believe we've been engaged in for a very long time. Again, forces of both good and evil. And again, how this is being propositioned and positioned, more importantly, by the mainstream media as a Russian-led event, when really it's the absolute opposite. Russia is simply defending and responding to the aggressive, preemptive intent that is the United States, that is the World Bank, that is the United Nations, this malintent to destabilize this part of the world. And the more rhetoric and the more propaganda that we get in the mainstream media and from the West, positioning Russia in the light of aggressor, when we know that's not the case, should only mean and make you more concerned about just how serious this geopolitical event actually is. Again, folks, in my humble opinion, this is World War III. As global superpowers join together, Russia and China in agreement over Ukraine. You see Putin here and China shaking hands, and the rest of the world perceiving Obama as a child geopolitically, as probably the weakest U.S. leader ever in the history of America, who has been on a planned and firm agenda of total destruction and chaos here in the United States from the day of his first inauguration and his laughable second re-election here in the States only proves this point. Again, this is extremely serious. War is not just on the horizon, folks. It is here. And as global markets tumble, as the crisis ensues overseas and here in the United States, the clock ticks on what the mainstream media will portray as a Russian invasion, which could literally be happening right now while I'm delivering this video, when this is really just a response and a retaliatory response from Russia and the United States' nefarious agenda in these parts of the world to spark a storm that I believe will be far worse than anything we have ever seen. You've been tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television, hard-hitting and in your face. I'm Christopher Green. Please subscribe now to AMTV if you haven't already, and get this video out everywhere and make it viral.